Mrs. Noem, it'll be your chance to, Governor Noem, wait 2 minutes. I'm going to give a presentation. Thank you for your patience. Just be 2 minutes to join us. So, the day was long, quite long. We heard many people, many views, but we are all freedom fighters. Different countries, different struggles, but we are authentic. We are true to our beliefs. And that's why we're here today. And we will have the great honor today for the closing speech. Give me 2 seconds. Don't want to make any mistakes to present our dear guest. Governor Noem is a rancher, farmer, small business owner, and New York Times best-selling author of Not My First Rodeo, Lessons Learned from the Heartland. In 2010, after serving in South Dakota legislature for several years, Governor Noem was elected to serve as South Dakota's lone member of the U.S. House of Representatives. During her time in Congress, in addition to many other successes, Governor Noem helped pass the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which put $2,400 back in the pockets of average South Dakota families. In 2018, with the platform of protecting South Dakotans against tax increases, government growth, federal intrusion, and government secrecy, she was elected as South Dakota's first ever female governor. In 2022, Governor Noem was reelected with the largest vote total in the history of South Dakota. As governor, Noem has respected the rights of her people by trusting them to exercise their personal responsibility to make their best decisions for themselves, their loved ones, and in turn, their communities. Governor Noem has focused on building stronger families, keeping South Dakota open for business. Despite all of this, Governor Noem often says that her greatest accomplishment is raising her 3 children, Cassidy, Kennedy, and Booker, with her husband Brian. All have a deep love for their family and an even deeper love for the Lord. Again, we are privileged to have Governor Noem with us tonight, and thank you for coming and joining us. Thank you, Mrs. Noem. Thank you.
Well, good evening. I get to be the grand finale for the day. Thank you so much for inviting me. Randy, thank you so much for inviting me to be with all of you. The Worldwide Freedom Initiative is a pretty special event. I'm going to speak to you a little bit of my background and my story, how we have done things in South Dakota, and then also why it's so important as you, as leaders around the world, continue to hold up the beacon of liberty, and how important it is that we have people that will step forward and not just live their daily lives, but those who are engaged and involved in being the example that so many other people so desperately need to follow today in this day and age. So when most people think about the United States of America, they think about the gritty streets of New York City, or they think about the bright lights of Hollywood. They don't necessarily think of the middle of the country, which is where I come from, which is the prairie region, the western part of the United States of America. The small towns and villages that cover much of this countryside too, we also have that same kind of culture and way of life in the great state of South Dakota. You all have probably heard a little bit about me, but I don't know if you necessarily know how I grew up. I grew up as the daughter of a cowboy. Much like John Wayne is how my dad was. He was tough. I tell people that he used to wake us up by yelling up the stairs every morning, "Get up. More people die in bed than anywhere else." I didn't know if that was necessarily true, but what was interesting to me was growing up with him is he taught us to be problem solvers. I tell people so many times that one of the greatest gifts that my parents ever gave me was impossible things to do. I see that we have some young people here in the crowd today, and I would tell you, for all of you who are parents or grandparents to this next generation, give your children impossible things to do. There was many times my dad would give me something and I would think there's no way I can accomplish that. For instance, when I was about 12 years old was the first time we were leaving a field with a semi, an 18-wheeler truck full of corn, and I was sitting in the passenger seat, he was driving, and he said, "Kristi, I need to take the other truck home. Jump over here, make your corners wide, and I'll meet you back at home." And he jumped out the door. So 12 years old, I'm driving a semi, dove across the cab. I took the widest corners that you've ever seen, the 7 miles home. When I got into the yard, I didn't even know how to shut the truck off. I just remember turning the key and letting it drift to a stop. I remember thinking at the time, I cannot believe that I lived. But the second thought that I had was, I bet I can drive anything now. And that is what we're robbing from our children by doing everything for them. We are taking away their opportunity to solve a problem, to accomplish things, to build their confidence to take on the next biggest challenge. Defending our freedoms and liberties in this world today will be difficult. It will be challenging. We will need to have a generation that has taken on some impossible things and accomplished them to give them enough confidence to continue to go out and take on the next biggest obstacle that they face. So for all of you who are parents or grandparents, I would ask you to give your children impossible things to do. By doing everything for them, you are crippling them. And instead, we need them empowered to go out and continue to fight and to be the problem solvers that we need. Now, my dad was tough, and we worked all the time. In fact, even our vacations often were work because they were hunting trips. But I grew up wanting to be with him. But when I was in college, he was killed in an accident on our farm. People ask me so many times how I got involved in government and politics, and it was during that time. When Dad was killed in an accident, we got hit in our family about a month afterwards with a letter that came in the mail from the IRS that said we owed death taxes. So at that time, we were some of the largest farmers and ranchers in our state. We had several other businesses as well. And we had a bill from the IRS that we could not pay. I was 22 years old at the time, ended up quitting college to come home and take over all of the businesses. And I learned that we were not going to be able to pay these taxes, and it made me angry. So that's how I got involved in government and politics, was I just started showing up at meetings, got passionate about tax reform. At the time, the estate tax in the country at the federal level was 55%. So if you can imagine having land and machinery and cattle, but not any money in the bank, paying those taxes was very, very difficult. In fact, I ended up getting a loan for some of it, got some wealthy farmers to loan me other amounts of money to help cover that. It took me 10 years to pay it back. But it got me involved in government and policy and ended up running for office. I served in our state legislature. I got elected to Congress and served 4 terms there, served on the Ways and Means Committee, which is the committee that has jurisdiction over all tax policy, healthcare policy. About 80% of what goes through Congress goes through the Ways and Means Committee. Was very blessed to be a part of tax reform when President Trump was in office and had the chance to work on that bill for 2.5 years with him and was very proud to do that. But I started to look at running for governor because I recognized there's a big difference between serving in Congress and being a governor. In Congress, you have the chance to work on policy. You get the chance to give speeches and work on national security issues, other things I was passionate about. But governors are CEOs. Governors get the chance to wake up every single day and to make decisions, to set an agenda of what they could do in their state that would really be innovative. I ran for governor on being a governor that built stronger families, because I believe that a lot of what is broken in the world today is the breakdown of the family. I don't care what the family looks like. I just think a family needs to be around you and supportive for our kids to be successful going forward. I also ran on growing our state. Our state of South Dakota, for the 20 years before I was governor, was shrinking. People were moving out of the state. Our economy was shrinking. Businesses were leaving, and our kids, to get the career of their dreams, needed to leave in order to pursue those opportunities. So I said I was going to grow our state, diversify our economy, bring in new industries, and build stronger families. You know, it probably wasn't until I was being sworn in as governor, after I'd won a very difficult race, that I was standing in the rotunda that day being sworn in, and it was filled with thousands of people. And they were talking about the significance of the fact that I was the first female governor of the state to be elected. They were talking about the fact that it was so significant because it was also the anniversary, the 100th anniversary of women getting the right to vote in our state. So here I was being tasked with being the leader of our state on the 100th anniversary of women even getting the right to vote, and the entire ceremony was built around how remarkable that was, how historic it was. Now, being raised by a dad who was a cowboy who was tough, he never treated me any different than the boys. My brothers and I were treated exactly the same. We were all expected to work hard and do anything that needed to be done on the ranch. When I served in the legislature, I was one of just a handful of women there, didn't focus on the fact that I was one of the few females, got elected to Congress, was the first Republican female to be elected to Congress from our state. When I got there, very few conservative women served. But then standing there in that rotunda in our state capitol being sworn in, it started to hit me that this was kind of a big deal, that it was pretty significant that I was being sworn in. And I remember standing there with everyone looking at me, thinking to myself, I better not screw this up. And I started to think about what I was promising. There was two things that I was promising that day. One was to uphold the Constitution of the state of South Dakota. The second was to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. Those were the two promises that I was making, and that those were the two things that I just needed to remember and make the basis of every decision from going forward. See, people have asked me now for the last several years, especially since the pandemic, how I make my decisions. I speak on leadership quite a bit because it seems like that is what is so vacant in today's day and age. You've talked about important issues. You've talked about immigration, homeschooling, tax policy. You've talked about protecting freedoms. I never would have dreamed that I'd see the threat on freedoms that we've seen the last several years. And people ask me so many times, how did you make your decisions in South Dakota? How did you do that? How do you make difficult decisions? And I've told everyone it is easy when you know what your foundation is. If you know your core value system of how you make those decisions and go back to that, then you always start on the right footing so that those decisions can be wise and thoughtful. Now, my first year as governor saw a natural disaster hit our state. 63 of our 66 counties, so the vast majority of our state, 90% of it was wiped out by floods. I spent that whole year patching communities back together, helping families heal, building cities and roads and bridges again. I thought for sure when I got into 2020, it would be a better year. And then COVID came. And I think throughout that, because it's been a long day for all of you, I'll keep it short, but I think throughout all of that, I did the same thing that every other governor did in our country. We all studied the virus. We all studied and talked to our health experts, visited with people that understood viruses, what we could do, what we couldn't do. I think what I did in South Dakota that was very different was I spent a lot of time with my constitutional attorneys, with my general counsel. I really wanted to understand what authority I had as a governor, but also what authority I did not have as a governor. Because I believe that when leaders overstep their authority, especially in a time of crisis, that's when we lose our country. That's when we lose our freedoms. So for instance, in South Dakota, we were the only state in the entire country that never once closed a single business. We never once mandated anything. We never once dictated what people had to do. I stood up in front of my people and told them that we were going to embrace personal responsibility. I'd give them all the information that I had, but we were going to get through these difficult times together. In fact, I didn't even define what an essential business was because I don't believe that governors have the authority to tell you that your business isn't essential. We were the only state in the entire country that when the president offered those elevated unemployment benefits, I said, thank you, Mr. President, for that flexibility, but we don't need it. Our people want to work, and they did overwhelmingly. I've had other governors tell me since then, Kristi, when you made those decisions, we thought you were crazy. We had conference calls every single week where we would talk as governors throughout the United States about what we were doing, the decisions that we were making. Eventually, that turned into a call of states that were just open still, that hadn't shut down their economies, hadn't shut down their businesses. That got to be fewer and fewer people every week until I was the only one left. It was a bit of a lonely time for leaders because at that time, every night on the national news and frankly around the world, they were making me sound like I was someone who didn't care and was making irrational decisions. But I will tell you this, to this day I know for a fact, I was the only one making my decisions based on the Constitution. And based on a Constitution that as I look at France and have the opportunity to be here today for the first time, where so many of the great French thinkers brought to us the ideals of our Constitution, brought to us the embodiment of what that independence and what that liberty really is. It was a monumental friendship between France and the United States that gave us our structure that I still hold to and so many leaders need to hold on to in order to protect personal freedoms and liberties. I would have never dreamed that I would see government use fear like they did to control people, and that they would use fear like they did to pursue an agenda, to fundamentally remake our society, to remake our country, to remake the world. And then people rolled over and just gave up their freedoms. Because the government told people that they couldn't gather together in meetings, people gave up their freedom of assembly. Because the government said that you couldn't go to church, they gave up their freedom of religion. Because the government is allowing certain social media platforms, they're allowing certain entities to tell you what you can say and what you can't say, people are giving up their freedom of speech. We need defenders of freedom and liberty today. What I believe happened in our state is that we just did what conservatives have always said they believed. But we did it, and we proved that it works, that it really is better for families, it really is better for businesses, that it is better for those who want to be happier. Today in South Dakota, we are growing by population at 10 times the national average. We've got historic revenues coming in. We don't have income taxes. We don't have personal property taxes. All we have is a 4.2% sales tax, and we are breaking revenue numbers coming in because our economy is growing so fast. We're breaking records in new housing developments. Our birth rate is going up faster than it ever has in history, and the fastest in the country. Incomes are going up faster than anywhere else, and women-owned businesses are growing, and their incomes are growing faster than they ever have before. What's interesting to me is that even while all of this is going on, we also broke the nation's historic unemployment record with the lowest unemployment in the history of the United States of America at 1.8%, because everybody in South Dakota gets up and they go to work and they provide for their families and embrace personal responsibility. Now, what I'm proud of is the fact that not only do all those economic indicators show us and prove to us that conservative principles work, also what was interesting was our statistics that had to do with suicide, mental health, and overdoses were so astonishing too. We're the only state where our mental health challenges went down, where suicides dropped, and where overdoses have dropped instead of risen like you hear from all across the United States and the rest of the world. See, our people, because they were free, they were happier. They were happier, they were able to make personal responsibility choices for themselves and for their families. I believe now so many times when this little state in the middle of the United States of America gets attacked, and when they come after me, that they understand that the reason that that is happening is because we did what conservatives believe. We did it and we proved that it worked. So what I want to call on for all of you today is that you don't just talk about conservative principles, that we do them, we implement them, that we don't quit, and that we don't give up. See, I think it's monumental to me personally, the fact that I get to be here close to Armistice Day. It was the war to end all wars. And it's a reminder for all of us to be steadfast in what we embrace and the light that these few democracies that are left in the world portray to the rest of the world We have to embrace those ideals in order to avoid future conflicts. And when we look at what is going on with Russia invading Ukraine, we look at what is going on with Hamas and attacking Israel, and China grabbing more and more power and freedom from the world, we have to continue to live this beacon of light so that other people recognize that there is a different path than those conflicts that we have. So we avoid a future conflict that would be one larger than the war to end all wars. We remember our history so that we can not repeat it into the future. What I would ask all of you is, we have the Statue of Liberty in New York City Harbor that was a gift from the nation of France. Few people know the official name of the Statue of Liberty. It's Liberty Enlightening the World. And as you watch the Statue of Liberty, as she holds her torch high, it is enlightening the world and showing people the way. We are desperate for leaders and examples to lead the way for the world. I would tell you that in South Dakota, because we made very different decisions than any other state did, it's lighting the way for how to be economically successful, how to embrace liberty and freedom. But we don't do that and then turn and not talk about it. We have to continue to carry that testimony forward so that, like the Statue of Liberty, we're holding it high as an example. Now, we're not forcing our will and forcing other countries to comply with that liberty, but we're showing them the path so that they can follow that example that it is. That's what the United States has always been. That's what our relationship has always been with France. That is what we need to continue to do today. So as you are all sitting here as leaders, I would encourage you, everything that you've heard today, I think is remarkable and policy that needs to be pursued and talked about, debated, passed on to the next generation. But the other thing that I would tell you is that I would love for all of you to hold that torch high and bright and lead the way, because others will follow. Others will follow. I had other leaders tell me, whether it was at the national level, at the state level, or the local level throughout the pandemic, that when you made your decisions in South Dakota, you gave us cover. Because you kept things open, several weeks later, I felt more comfortable opening up my economies again, letting my businesses open again. So while things may seem difficult in whatever role that you're in, whatever you're doing, and you may wish to not always constantly be in conflict or the one standing strong, just know that what your light and what your example is makes a monumental difference. You are the leaders of the future, the leaders of right now, but you're also the custodians of our history. You're the protectors of our culture and our tradition. You're the defenders of our people. You literally are the only ones left to continue to defend democracy so that others may know that story. Don't let our history that we've so lived through and generations have lived through be for nothing. Let it be for something that our kids and our grandkids can be proud of, the legacy that we've left behind. I've got people that work with me that work so hard all the time, and I had one time my press secretary, who, if you know, the press secretaries many times feel like they're constantly in conflict with media. He was exhausted and tired, and I said to him, I said, listen, I know you're tired, and I know it feels like it never stops, but I said, when you die, you will have lived a life of significance. So know that even though defending liberty and carrying it worldwide may be difficult and tiring and wear on you, that you will have lived a life of significance. I remind people consistently every day in my state, if we don't hang on to the ideals that form the foundation of this country, where will we go? Where will we go that will give us more opportunity, more freedom, more personal responsibility than the United States of America? And then get back into the fight and remember to remind everybody about how truly special that is. So thank you for letting me be with you. And I don't know, Randy, if you want me to take a question or two, I sure can too. Whatever.
Pleasure. I'm sure everybody would.
That's always more fun for me.
Thank you.
Yep.
Wait to... Okay. Standing ovation for our governor. Thank you very much. Does someone have a question or two? You can have a seat. Thank you. And thank you, Governor Noem, for opening up a small session for questions. Would you have a question? Vous avez une question? Mr. Orban, question?
You're wondering when dinner is.
Yeah. Anybody have a question for Mrs. Noem? Yes. Mark, with pleasure.
Mark Zell, Chairman, Republicans Overseas Israel.
Yes.
And I want to thank you, Governor, for your extraordinarily concise and moving and impressive speech. My question to you is, Donald Trump, what is your opinion of him? And if he picked you to be vice president, would you serve?
Pretty direct question, I see, yeah.
Well, I will do my very best to answer your question. What I love about President Trump is that he let me do my job. As governor, he let me make the decisions that I was supposed to be making in my state. If Joe Biden had been in the White House, he would have never let me do my job. He would have forced me to shut down my state, take away people's freedoms, punished us for it. In fact, every day, what happens now is under this administration, I feel like I get up every single day on defense and fight for my people. I spend 80% of my time just trying to protect what we have. Where when President Trump was in the White House, I was on offense. I could be creative. I could figure out how to cut regulations that made us more efficient, how to give people more opportunities. I could be on offense and take ideas to him, and he would help me do that and lighten the burden off of people. Under Joe Biden, what has happened now is instead, I spend most of my time just trying to defend the people in my state. So I'm so thankful that when President Trump was president of the United States, that he embraced giving us as other leaders the opportunity to actually do our job.
Thank you very much. One last question. Anybody have one last question? Give you the honor of presenting a last question. I was thinking about, because South Dakota is America, the heart of America's farmland. We have an ardent defender of the farmers from Holland. Maybe she has a question for you. And I think it's important. It's also a very strong fighter, a very charismatic woman. So why don't you give one question for the governor?
Yeah, thank you very much. And it has been this much, or I was living in South Dakota.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Yes,
Fantastic.
we visited, my husband and I visited South Dakota. But circumstances, life sometimes takes another road. Yes. But we went there to look if we could farm there already, because in the Netherlands you didn't have a chance in hell to stay a farmer and really do what you want to do. I'm very much impressed by what you tell us, and I think I can use your story for our own farmers to get more courage again.
Well, the one thing that I would like all of you to do is, when you talk about food policy, when you talk about legislation that impacts farmers, whatever your safety programs are, it's a national security policy. I've been talking about this for the last 25 years since I've been involved in farming or involved in making policy that impacts farmers. But the more that we allow other countries to control our food and grow our food for us, the more they control us. Yep. We have seen for 25 years in the United States of America, China come in, and they started back 25 years ago when I was talking about buying up our fertilizer companies, our chemical companies, buying up our genetics. Now they're actively buying land in the United States of America. They are buying up our entire supply system, and when they control our food, they will wholly control us. People think a pandemic was scary. Wait until they go to the grocery store and they can't get food to feed their family just because a country who hates us controls that supply chain. So China plays the long game. They've had a plan for thousands of years of how to dominate the world. I'm concerned that Americans, and perhaps other countries in the world, that our people can't even stand to be inconvenienced anymore. We can barely tolerate a 5-minute delay. Instead, we'll say, well, we'll give up that freedom, that right, that inconvenience to make it simpler. So, we were the first state in the country, in the United States, to ban TikTok and say that it would just be... After I did that and talked about how they were actively mining our data and using it to go against us and to control us, 27 other states followed our example. So never forget that wherever you are, when you're pushing on policy items like that, others will follow. You're educating people every time you do something. But our food policy is a national security issue, and it's something I think people are starting to wake up to now. But whenever you get the opportunity to continue to grow your own food and to have it be a diversified supply chain, you'll be much safer as a country.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. And for a small question, the question was about being vice president. I think you should really run for office because you would do a great thing for the whole world,
well,
really.
We have time for one more question for you, Mrs. Noem.
We can, sure.
Thank you.
Till we get one that gets me in trouble, right? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Governor. I'm Florent Noblet from the French Reconquest Party with Mr. Zemmour, who is our president.
Wonderful.
What is your, from your overall perception of the situation today in France? Because certain people in France, we are frightened by a certain way of decline, that it's a reality. Is it a certain position that you have this kind of perception from the United States or not, in terms of not only agriculture but also in terms of industry, of diplomacy, and of course of wokeism? And what do you think about?
What I would say to you is, so many times when you're looking at what's happening on the streets today and what's happening in government in France, it can get discouraging. I would encourage you to lean on your history. Lean on your history, and don't forget to talk about it because of what it means every time you do, how it educates the current population. We have a very uneducated population that's greatly swayed by emotion and what they've seen in the last half hour on TV. So that is what is shocking to me, is we're seeing the same trends in the United States that you're seeing here in France as well. But you cannot continue to talk about change without showing in the past what your history has meant to you. Embrace law and order. Embrace being a nation that stands for right and wrong, and continue to perpetuate that in every policy you have, and take the complication out of it. We still forget that as leaders, we want to be right. We want to look at what we're seeing as an eroding of our government and our way of life and our culture. But the most powerful thing that will change somebody's life is a story of what they will hear, and they will remember, and they will repeat it over and over again. So as smart as all of you are, and I know you're all intellectuals in the room, tell the stories of the people that are suffering under your current policies. Tell the stories of people who were successful under more freedom and more law and order policies that can happen, because that is what is going to be so powerful. I can get down to in a debate with you on any topic of what I see happening throughout Europe and what I see on energy policy or on any topic when it comes to national security issues. But you have to, if you're going to be effective and want the population whose hearts and minds you have to win, you have to do it through the simplicity of a story that grabs their attention, so that then they will grasp the facts that you're sharing with them as well.
Thank you very much, Governor Noem. Everybody give her a standing ovation, please, again, for coming all the way from South Dakota to join us. Thank you, Mrs. Noem.
Absolutely.
Thank you very, very much. I'd like to make some closing remarks, and give me a few minutes of your time. As the day closes, we have covered many, many topics. We have gone a long journey. A journey, everybody talks, why do we go on the journey? Well, the fact is, it's not to get from a point from A to B. The journey is the whole path from A to B. And that's the journey we are taking today. The journey is to where we want to take from point A as people who we are, and B is to a place we want to go and to be for our future, for our children's future. We know we need to fight. We know that we must rely, and as Governor Noem says, we must be examples of courage. She talked about COVID, and like I say to people, I'm not such a great sense of humor. My kids make fun of me. I say, what do courage and COVID have in common? They're both contagious. So if you can show some courage like we have today here, a little, the fact that you are here today is already a sign of courage. The fact that we have all these leaders here is a sign of hope. And it's a sign of courage that we can do better tomorrow. Tomorrow will be better. We must be the moral compass for the future. We must fight. They tried to cancel us here 3 days ago. I fought like Governor Noem, and she was saying, we have long nights, long days. I haven't slept for 3 days, but if we want to fight for freedom, that's the fight we need to take. No one said it was going to be easy, but we must show the example to our future generations. For this, I thank each one of you. I want to thank also my staff who made this possible. I'd like to thank all our guests. I'd like to thank all the teams that are here. I also want to also take some time to thank my family, my children, my parents who have always been there, because without a solid family and without solid values, I wouldn't be here today. So much big thank you to all of you. And as a last statement, because what it makes possible too is I want to thank also our key sponsor, the Danube Institute. I'd like Mr. Itzmankis to say a couple of words to us because he was also very generous, but not just being generous, but he also had an authentic sense of devotion to this cause. And when I spoke to him on his phone, I said, Randy, you're going to make this possible. And I said, don't worry, I'll make it possible. And I'm very happy to have shared this moment with him. Come and join us for just to say a couple of words, Mr. Kis. The Danish Institute is one of the largest think tanks in Hungary, and thank you very much for your support.
Thank you very much, Randy, for the kind words. It's a real privilege and honor to be here with you. I think these events are crucial. They are very crucial for three main reasons, I think. First, because the left has been doing the same for more than a century. They have been doing this since at least the end of the 19th century with the communist and socialist internationals. They developed huge networks. They have their own NGOs like Freedom House or Amnesty International. They have their huge conferences. They have regular talks where they share their ideas. They come together. Sadly, the right conservatives have been lacking in this. We haven't been doing events like this only just recently. And I think it's crucial that we do these. Second is that we share the same values, despite what we hear sometimes. Sadly, as I mentioned, the left has built its own organizations. The mainstream media is mostly owned by the left, and we will hear a lot of falsehoods and untrue things about our own movements, about our own countries. That's why I want to just quickly show you why we established the Hungarian Conservative 3 years ago. There's still some copies to the right of the room if you're interested. My colleagues can give you copies. To kind of counter some of the narratives which are spreading about Hungary and which are mostly false about them. And I think it's crucial that we show these values with events like this, where we come together, share our ideas, get to know each other. Because as I said, the left has been doing it, and we have to catch up. And also because, don't mistake, we hear a lot of stories here, terrible stories. Coming from a post-communist country, I really was saddened and was fearful of what I heard here about how assets are being frozen because you are a member of a party or because you are participating in protests against the government. Namely conservative government can accept net zero goals and go to farmers and tell them to kill animals. These are terrible things. These remind me of communism in Hungary, where you had plans and the government could just do whatever they wanted to do with you. This is wrong. And these people will come after us. So we have to stick together, we have to talk, we have to share ideas. And also the third reason is that we can learn from each other. And I think we had a lot of interesting speeches here, which we could take away and learn from. And I think Hungary has a lot of things to offer as well. Again, that's why we established this journal. Of course, I would warn you about following blindly policies. Sadly, Hungary did that mistake under socialist governments in the 90s and the 2000s. But still, you might find interesting elements in Hungarian policy which you might mimic. Of course, it's also important to share political campaign strategies, as was mentioned here with the Trump campaign team. So I think these are the three main reasons we have to organize more events like this, and that's why I'm very grateful to Randy. Thank you very much for organizing this, especially with all the backlash you have been getting. You really had to, do the miracle and reorganize the whole conference almost in 2 days. So thank you very much for that. Also to Solomon, I hope we can work together in the future more. And of course also to, I'm not sure if Rodrigo is still here, an honorary Hungarian, who basically, brought us together and introduced me to you. So once again, I would like to thank you all. Thank you, of course, to all the guests. And I very much hope that this is the beginning of the beautiful friendship, and then, this is going to be the first event of many. Thank you, and I hope you all have a lovely dinner.
Thank you very much. For those that reserved the dinner today, so let's get organized a little bit. So some of you need a break. We need to clear up. Yes?
I want to thank everybody here, of course, for being here. But really, us here at Republicans Overseas, whether big global or the local French organization, we owe so much to Randy. And it falls on me to make sure that we really thank him, because what has occurred here really has been a miracle. Really, we have put all of our faith and our trust to make something happen out of nothing. And it's because of your undying and you just will not let anything go. Really, he's such a fighter, and we are so honored that you are our president of our chapter and that you work for the RO Global organization, because this is your passion, and we thank you from the bottom of our heart. We also thank Solomon, that's also part of this. Thank you very much, Randy. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. And your trust and your faith in me is a guiding light. Thank you very much. Don't leave, the speakers don't leave. We have gift baskets that are prepared by our super Camilla Furman. We're going to be distributing to all the speakers. At the same time, for dinner, our dear caterer needs just time to clear up the place. Give us about an hour and a quarter. What time is it now? 8:30. Give us till 9:30, 9:45, 9:30. You can take a walk, come back. Maybe if your hotel is nearby, you can change. If you want to take a drink, and you come back for the dinner, okay? Let's give them some downtime to get the place cleaned up, and we will see you in about an hour and 15 minutes or so, okay? Thank you very much. It has been a wonderful day, and I'm looking forward to seeing you probably next year. May the force be with us, right?
Congratulations, brother. Great,
Thank
great
you.
Stuff. Amazing. Jim Gossett. Thanks.